Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Fortify Your Payments, Best Practices for Verifying Bank Account Ownership. Today's webinar is sponsored by Vendor Info. I'm Mark Brousseau, President of Brousseau & Associates. I'm pleased to be one of your presenters for today's webinar. Just a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. To ensure call quality, everyone's voice lines have been muted today. We encourage you to ask questions throughout today's webinar. To do so, simply use the Q&A tool on your screen to submit your questions to me. We'll answer your questions at the conclusion of today's webinar. And finally, an on-demand recording of today's webinar will be made available to all of you within the next few business days. We encourage you to share it with your peers and coworkers. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Phil Binko, Chief Executive Officer of Vendor Info. Hello, Phil. Welcome aboard.
Hi, Mark. Thanks a lot. It's great to be here.
If it feels like your organization's risk of payment fraud is higher these days, well, you're not alone. The fact of the matter is that the risk of payment fraud is the #1 concern of accounts payable professionals. This is a big change compared to just a few years ago when AP leaders were focused on day-to-day topics such as invoice exceptions and delayed payments. But we've seen a big swing in not only paper check fraud, but also electronic payment fraud. The fact is that cyber criminals are becoming far more sophisticated. It used to be that payment fraud was largely about brute force, intercepting paper checks, whitewashing them, and depositing them into an account that a fraudster controlled. Well, that's all changing. The risk of payment fraud is increasing, and organizations have to find ways to protect their financial assets. And one of the key ways you can do that is by rethinking the way that your organization goes about verifying ownership of bank account details. Today, organizations are under siege from fraudsters with a wide range of fraud schemes. Many electronic payment fraud schemes start with phishing. Yeah, I know back in the day, phishing schemes were almost laughably obvious. You'd get an email from a Nigerian prince who wanted to send you $5 million. All you had to do was provide your credit card details and the money would be on its way. Today's phishing schemes are far more sophisticated and much harder to be able to discern. You'll see in many cases where you'll receive emails with a link that might have ransomware or malicious software or spyware, or might even take you to a site that appears to be a supplier's portal, or maybe the site that you use for your ERP or banking portal, except when you type in your credentials, well, that information is being captured by a fraudster, not the legitimate software. Some of these emails also have downloads with malicious software embedded in them. And in many cases, these emails ask you to update things like your ERP login. It's hard to be able to tell the fraudulent emails from the legitimate ones. One of the problems we have is business email compromise. Over the past several years, businesses in the United States have lost tens of billions of dollars to business email compromise. In fact, more money is lost each year in the United States to BEC schemes than to bank robberies. Now, I know bank robberies are far more exciting than business email compromise attacks, but these are the statistics I'm given. You probably have experienced business email compromise attacks, maybe recently. Traditionally, these were cases where you'd receive an email from a trusted supplier or maybe even a senior manager asking you to urgently change the bank account details for a supplier, or else they wouldn't get paid and your supply chain would grind to a halt. Today, fraudsters have become even more sophisticated. Now it's not uncommon to receive texts and in some cases even voice messages that appear to be from someone you know. And these business email compromise schemes can be tricky when we're busy and where we want to be able to please a valued supplier or our CFO. we might be tempted to go ahead and make that change without going through every step that our policies dictate. Unfortunately, that would be falling into the fraudster's trap. We also see cases of account takeover more often these days. In many cases, these start with phishing scams. Once a fraudster has your credentials, well, now they've got the keys to your kingdom. They can lie in wait and steal your valued data, or maybe just initiate payments on their own. In some cases, they take over systems used by your suppliers and create fraudulent invoices. And that brings us to invoice fraud. Now that we're seeing more and more suppliers submitting invoices via email, we're seeing more and more cases of altered or phony invoices coming into our pipe streams. It can be hard in some cases to detect these phony emails, and that is what the fraudsters are counting on. And incredibly, we're also seeing more and more cases of check tampering. That's right, check fraud is still a thing. Hard to believe that checks are still a thing. But the fact is that a recent study by the Federal Trade Commission found that check fraud increased by 18% in the past year. If you write checks, you've got to know that it is the payment methods that's most susceptible to fraud. It's too easy for fraudsters to be able to intercept checks and manipulate them and deposit them into their own accounts. In some cases, they're able to deposit a check without ever even whitewashing it, changing the payee. This is scary stuff. Here in Philadelphia, where I live, they tell us not to put paper checks in the blue mailboxes that are on, well, just about every street corner in our city. Turns out you could buy the keys to those mailboxes on the dark web. And last year, we had a string of cases where bad actors were actually assaulting mail carriers to steal their keys. This is an environment that really creates lots of concerns for AP leaders. Fact is that one case of fraud can have significant financial and reputational consequences for your organization. We tend to focus on the direct financial losses, and, well, for good reason. No one wants to be on the front page of the business section, having lost millions of dollars being tricked in a fraud scheme. But as bad as those financial losses are, they can be just the tip of the iceberg. Payment fraud could also damage our relationships with suppliers. Suppliers might wonder whether they should really be doing business with your company if it can't be trusted to safeguard their sensitive information. In some industries, organizations could face legal and regulatory penalties if they fall victim to payment fraud. Payment fraud can tarnish your company's reputation with stakeholders, with investors, with analysts on Wall Street. And left unchecked, well, payment fraud can lead to market decline. It can cost you your stock value. And it's hard to believe, but we might unwittingly be leaving the barn door open for fraudsters in the way that we go about some of our traditional AP processes. The fact is unless you're fully automated, a lot of AP processes take a lot of time, especially when it comes to onboarding suppliers and validating vendor information. And we know that each moment of delay it takes to verify and validate information is a moment that fraudsters can use against us. We also know that traditional AP processes, whether it's supplier onboarding or approving invoices or even chasing down approvals on approved invoices, are susceptible to human error. Someone could be a new employee and not fully aware of our processes and procedures. They could be having a bad day and overlook a key point that might have us believe it's something that requires further review. Or worse yet, we might have someone in our organization who cuts a corner on a policy because they don't believe it's their job to verify things. All of those things can lead to higher risk of fraud. We also know that traditional AP processes are harder to scale and they're much, much harder to adapt to ever-changing fraud landscape. Make no mistake about it. Today's fraudsters are using technologies such as artificial intelligence against us. Just as we plug one hole in our defenses, they seem to find one more. And yes, many traditional AP processes simply don't validate and verify data and documents. They leave too many gaps in the process. So, how do you mitigate your risk of fraud? Well, the first, of course, is to train staff on fraud awareness. Many organizations take what I describe as a set it and forget it approach to training their finance employees on fraud. You know the drill. You sit down a new employee and you tell them the do's and don'ts, the things to look for when they're going about their daily activities. We pat them on the back and we send them on their way. And then that's it. Well, the fact is fraud schemes are constantly evolving. That means we need to be constantly telling our employees what to look for. And it's not just those folks in AP, it's everyone who touches financial transactions or our supplier relationships. So we've got to make sure that we have staff training that's ongoing. It's engaging, so we keep them involved, and it's interactive. So we test them to make sure that they've actually learned what it is we're trying to test them on. This is particularly important for those organizations that have experienced some of that turnover we've heard so much about in the past several years. Many AP departments, quite frankly, relied on seasoned staff to just know when something didn't look right. Yeah, wait a second. This company, they don't send us 4 invoices in a month. Somebody needs to look into this. We also need to make sure that we implement strong controls. And this is where invoice to pay automation is our friend. Invoice to pay automation solutions have lots of built-in controls to help protect sensitive data and safeguard our financial assets, whether it's user access permissions, systematic segregation of duties, configurable workflow rules that adhere to our organization's policies and procedures, complete audit tracking, or even the encryption of data. All of these controls help mitigate risk. You also want to make sure that your organization is using multi-factor authentication across all the systems in its department. I know it can be a hassle to have to use multi-factor authentication, but it's a way to ensure that you're dealing with a legitimate system. You also want to plan for the worst. You want to understand what it is your organization will do when it uncovers an attempt at fraud. Who will be notified? How will that information be circulated across your team so everyone's aware of the schemes to be on the lookout for? And then, God forbid, what will you do if your organization falls victim to fraud? Who will be notified? What actions will take place? And what mitigation efforts will be done? You also want to make sure that you're regularly reviewing and updating your fraud policies. I know many of you have policies and procedures in a book that sits on a shelf, and nobody might even know exactly where that shelf is. But you've got to make sure that you're constantly adapting because the fraudsters are. It's harder these days to be able to make sure everyone's on the same page in our AP department when it comes to fraud. Back in the day, we used to stand around the physical water cooler and be able to say, oh, you're not going to believe this. We received this email and they tried to trick me and I saw right through it. And everybody knows, okay, I need to be on the lookout for that type of scam. But now that we're working remotely, at least part of the time, it might be harder for us to share this information. So we've got to find mechanisms for making sure everybody is constantly on the lookout for all these schemes. These 5 strategies will help ensure that your organization protects its payments. But one of the most effective things you can do to help mitigate your organization's risk of falling victim to payment fraud is to help fortify and automate the way your organization goes about onboarding suppliers and managing supplier information. And that starts with a self-service supplier portal. Many organizations still rely on PDFs to be able to onboard suppliers and emails to manage those inevitable changes in supplier information once a supplier has been onboarded. Self-service supplier portals take a much different approach. A supplier is sent a link to register as a supplier with the company. The link takes them to a secure portal where they can upload documents and data required in order for a buyer to be able to make them a payable supplier. All that information that a supplier submits is validated and verified. TIN matching, OFAC checking, sanction screening, and yes, bank account ownership verification are all done automatically, fast. For things that don't look quite right, there's configurable approval workflows. There's going to inevitably be cases where all the information doesn't line up perfectly. In some cases, the system might determine that this is outright fraud. What do you want to happen? Now, configurable workflows ensure that the right people see the right information in a timely manner. And then once all the information has been verified and validated and a supplier is payable, the system can be integrated directly to your ERP so you could create that vendor record. One of the key features of a self-service supplier portal is bank account ownership verification. These types of technologies, which we're going to show you in just a few moments, give you the ability to validate vendor information against trusted data sources. So routing numbers, zip codes, country codes, addresses, all of that can be verified. And the solution can ensure that the bank account is open, that the owners match, and other criteria is fulfilled. That information is provided back in many cases in real time. So you can immediately or very quickly know whether this is a legitimate bank account details. And in cases where things don't line up, those configurable workflows come into play. You can determine who it is that reviews this information, and all the actions that they take are automatically tracked so you have a record of it. This is a powerful tool when it comes to mitigating risk. Automated bank account verification solutions streamline the verification process. They reduce human intervention and it improves efficiency. The technology can continuously validate against account details against trusted data sources, whether that's bank databases or OFAC databases or other sources. The solution also can be scaled quickly to handle larger volumes of transactions without compromising your accuracy and, most importantly, without you having to hire additional staff. Additionally, self-service supplier portals can support an unlimited number of data sources for validating and verifying information. So while the focus of today's webinar is on bank account validation, maybe you want to use different databases for, say, licensing or certifications. And importantly, you're able to reduce your risk of fraud with an automated bank account validation solution. There's a number of things to think about when you're evaluating self-service supplier portals that say they have bank account validation capabilities. What types of validations are available? What data is being validated? And how is that tracked? How easy is it to integrate this bank account verification solution with your legacy ERP? How scalable is this solution? Is it going to grow with your business, or is it the type of solution that you're going to outgrow? And what if you plan to do business, say, overseas? Does this solution have the ability to validate international bank accounts? You also want to think about how cost effective this solution is. What is the total cost of ownership? And finally, you want to make sure you understand, how is this vendor going to support you? What's their track record in onboarding suppliers and verifying vendor information? And what's going to happen when you have questions or need some help? The message we want to leave you with today is that cyber attacks and payment fraud are increasing. It's not just paper checks anymore. It's also ACH and electronic payment methods too. Fraudsters are becoming more sophisticated. They're using technology such as AI against us. And traditional processes and accounts payable, whether it's how we onboard suppliers or go about processing invoices, could be leaving our departments vulnerable, particularly when it comes to verifying bank account ownership. But the good news is best practices and automation can help your organization mitigate its risk of fraud. Don't take my word for it. We're now going to give Phil a chance to show you one solution from Vendor Info that can help your organization automatically verify bank account ownership. Phil? Phil? We can't hear you.
It's better when I turn off the mute. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. Appreciate it. What you're looking at right now is a screen that the vendors would see when they come to provide their information to you. Excuse me, it's a welcome screen. And the way that the vendors get to this screen is they're sent an invitation. And that invitation would go to the vendor. You can require various documents that you want them to be sure to complete and provide. You can give them customized messages depending on the type of vendor that it is, and you can schedule follow-ups for automatic reminders as well. So the vendor receives a invitation, and the invitation, I won't go through all of the security right now because it'd take a little long, but we can do that in a demonstration for you. But they come to the site, they register, they log on with multi-factor authentication, and then they just start filling out their forms. Their instructions would be here, and they're able to fill out your vendor information form, which would be customized around your particular requirements. They can enter their bank information as well. You can have them fill out W-9s or W-8s. You can even embed the W-9 into your vendor information form and make it a substitute W-9 if you like. Vendor signs these. If you're doing any international onboarding of vendors, the system has a really slick wizard that presents a number of dynamically generated questions that when the vendor answers it, they automatically pull up the correct W-8, because we know sometimes it can be hard for vendors to select the right W-8, and it walks them through that W-8 so that they fill it out correctly. And it eliminates them having to read 15 or 16 pages of IRSEs just to fill out one form. They would fill out banking forms as well, and the system will handle both domestic and international banks. They can enter that here, whether it's commercial, whether it's an individual account, if you're onboarding any 1099ers or contractors, and also international. And the system will automatically, if it's international, will automatically provide the correct templates for the particular country that in which the vendor banks. Now, once that information is entered into the system, you are notified and you're able to see exactly what the status is of the information that the vendor provided. Did they provide everything? Are there still some documents or pieces of information that they haven't provided yet? and you can instantly see the verifications. So verifications are color-coded, green, yellow, and red. This happens to be us, Financial Operations Networks, the employer identification number, or the TIN if it's a social security number for the independent contractors, is verified with the IRS. Everything is green here, so it all got verified. The address is checked. The various sanctions lists are also checked, such as OFAC, EU, UN, and UK, and also a whole host of other verifications, white collar crime, money laundering, FACTA, and you're able to see these right at your desktop. For bank account verifications, the same thing is true, and everything is green, yellow, or red. And the bank account is being, this is a domestic example, but for domestic, it's being verified on 8 data points, company name, street address, city, state, zip, and TIN. There's also a mapping that you can use for further verification as well. Of course, it verifies the routing number and the account number too. Now, if there was a problem with the verification, such as there is here with John Smith, that's going to show up in red or yellow. And in this particular case, the TIN is not valid and the address is problematic as well. And at this point, from the system, you can send a little email to the vendor and say, hey, there appears to be a discrepancy. Please click on the link below, and the vendor will be able to update the form. And of course, all the while, the system is taking care to make sure every entry is recorded, so you have complete audit trails of who did what and when they did it. In addition, if there was a problem with the bank, like there is here with Crazy Jim's Pizza, which is in yellow, we can see that the routing number and the account number indicate that this is a real bank, and it's actually under Crazy Jim's Pizza's name, but there are some problems with the address and the zip code and the warning, and the TIN. These are alerts. Those are minor discrepancies. Maybe it's a typo. But there's also a problem with the city and the state, and those are bigger issues. So it can really help you identify very clearly the real owner of that account is. Make sure it's the vendor who says that account belongs to them. As your folks go through, they can certainly review the forms and bring up all the documents that were submitted. And as they're doing this, and after they're completed, then they can click on this little approval button here, and click approve. And what that would do is start the review and approval process, where if you have a process where more than one person is involved in reviewing and approving the information from the vendor, it can go to the next person and the next person. It can go down multiple paths if you have certain criteria for approval workflows based on division of the company or vendor type, so on. And then once that information is actually approved, then it can get uploaded by a file to your ERP system and go right into your vendor file. So what this does for you is it puts the onus of the data entry on the supplier, which saves your folks some time, of course, and it also does automatic verification of all of the key data points that you need just to make sure you're complying with various laws and know your vendor programs that you might have initiatives on. It eliminates emails because the vendor isn't really coming here, isn't sending any emails anymore. And as Mark mentioned, emails are one of the prime sources that vendors, fraudsters use to get into the payment stream. I know this is a high-level overview, and Mark's going to provide our contact information. And I'd like to open it up for questions now, if we can, Mark, and also provide some contact information if folks here would like to do a deeper dive into this and see what it is and how it works, and find out more information about it.
So we're going to go into the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you haven't already submitted your question for Phil, or if you've thought of another question for Phil, go ahead, use that Q&A tool on your screen to submit your question to me now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Our first question up is from Chris. Chris wants to know, can this product verify Canadian bank accounts?
It can identify and verify Canadian bank accounts for sure.
What about international bank accounts?
International bank accounts too. Really, we can verify an account in any bank in any country in the world.
Yeah, and I want to excuse our Canadian friends. That's not to imply that Canada is not another country, but beyond Canada is what I meant. Oh my goodness. Maria's wondering, what's involved in setting up this solution?
Yeah, it can be pretty easy to set up. It's modular. So, we have customers who start off with just bank PIN or bank account and PIN verification. Others implement, more of a vendor onboarding system. It depends on the level of complexity of the account, but we have from the day we started with customers, this has been implemented in a couple of weeks. If it's very, very complicated and with many different workflows, it could take longer, obviously.
Tracy wants to know, how does the system prevent duplicate vendors from being set up? And does it have duplicate vendor control at the TIN level?
We can certainly do duplicate vendor control at the TIN level as well. It's a feature of the system, and it helps you keep your vendor file clean.
Yeah, and that brings us to another question from Lori. Lori's wondering about whether this integrates with SAP.
It does, and I might add it does integrate with SAP and with virtually every other ERP system.
Linda wants to know if she could just use the bank account verification part only.
Yes, you could. It's modular, and it works quite well that way.
And I see Troy here. A question from Troy wants to know about whether you have to be a certain size in order to cost justify this solution.
That's a really good question, Troy. When we started this, back in 2000, and then we started this product line back in 2009, we thought that most of the customers were really going to be large companies, enterprise and level, and so many of them are. But over the years, we have found that this can be scaled to smaller companies as well. So we have customers who are not very big. They're nonprofits, and they're small nonprofits, and they're able to use this very effectively.
Joanna has a follow-up question to Chris's initial question. She wants to know, so how does your system check Canada and other countries' vendor banking information?
Sure. We have a number of services that we tap into that verify bank accounts anywhere in the world. We have domestic services, we have international services as well. Certainly we can go through that in detail with you and be happy to. But it's not just one service. There's several.
Jared wants to know whether you integrate with Coupa.
We do. We have integrated with Coupa.
If we didn't, if you didn't get a chance to submit your question, or if you think of another question, Phil invites you to contact him using the information on his screen. And I understand, Phil, you're also willing to do a deeper dive demonstration for those folks who are interested, correct?
We'd be, of course, we'd be happy to show folks as much in.
And that will be our final word. Phil, thanks so much for an excellent presentation and for sharing all your insights with us today. And thank all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us. On behalf of Vendor Info, this is Mark Brousseau. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope to speak with you all again soon.
Thank you, Mark.